All right, so in 5.6, how did World War One end? Um, we just talked about the do now a little bit, so here we go. This is a little note heavy, so there's 3 good sized slides. All right, I'll give you a second. So I think Lincoln with an assault rifle riding a grizzly bear draped in the American flag is the most America picture of all. So there you go. So Friday we talked about this. Russia exits because of the Russian Revolution, enter the US, right? We talked about briefly the idea that this kind of unrestricted submarine warfare by the Germans was jeopardizing American trade interests, so that's why we entered. And when we enter the war, that kind of breaks the tie. Germany's going to make one last push toward Paris, but they will fail eventually, and they will suffer a big time defeat at Somme, and that's kind of it for them. In September of 1918, the US is going to land 1 million troops in France. I mean, large scale invasion of the highest order. And against all these troops and all these armies that have been fighting world war for the last several years, the United States coming in fresh is too much to kind of deal with, and we just kind of steamroll everything. And that's kind of the end of it. After they're defeated Somme, German leaders ask finally for their government to kind of, negotiate surrender and peace in September of 1918. And the war kind of comes to an end for all intents and purposes. And now we just got to work out the details. All right, I'll give you a second. I really need to update my memes. This is embarrassing. Success Kid is a little old. But regardless. Germany signs a peace treaty called the Treaty of Versailles, and this is what brings about the end of World War I. And it's super duper harsh on Germany. Now, there's kind of a similarity here to other topics that you may have heard about. This whole situation here with Germany and the Treaty of Versailles and the end of World War One, it really reminds me of the end of the Civil War in a lot of ways. Because one of the biggest arguments at the end of the Civil War is, okay, the South that seceded from the Union and then lost the Civil War, how should they be treated by the government that's in power? Should they be welcomed back with open arms? Should there be harsh punishments for them? How exactly should we deal with the South after the end of the Civil War? And that there's a lot of debate over that, and political parties are born and are formed around these ideas. And there's a lot of political conflict. And the situation with Germany is kind of the same. At the end of World War I, you need to decide, okay, how harsh do you want to be with them? Because if you're way, way too harsh, you're kind of asking for trouble and instability and problems. And if you're not harsh enough, you might not send the message that this is not okay. So this is a really, really fine line that the rest of the world and the winning side needs to kind of toe in order to kind of put this whole situation to bed. So the direction they decide to go in is they're overly harsh. This treaty is oppressive in nature, Treaty of Versailles. Germany is dealt severely harsh punishments, and in order for them to just kind of exist on a normal plane of existence politically, they would have to kind of break terms of this treaty. So a lot of people look toward the Treaty of Versailles and say, okay, Europe, as far as World War II is concerned, you're asking for it. And you should have known that this was not going to be over because you were so harsh to Germany that you're asking for more conflict. And that turns out to be true in the long run. But this is what Europe thought was best at the time. So they levy these huge punishments on Germany and kind of blame them for the beginning of World War I. So during the Treaty of Versailles, the harsh penalties for Germany were they had to sign what's called the war guilt clause, which is basically them saying, we started the war, we know we started the war, and this is our fault. This is kind of like, signing something at gunpoint, though. You know what I mean? So what does it really mean? But then they forced them to pay reparations. So responsible for this war, and you destroyed a whole bunch of Europe. You're going to pay to rebuild it, Germany, even though you don't have any money. Figure it out. They also had to disband their military, surrender colonies, and a whole bunch of other really, really harsh, um, punishments. So the general idea is that the Treaty of Versailles was overly harsh, and it amounted to the Allies kind of asking for trouble from Germany as they move forward. So the Treaty of Versailles is kind of the linchpin of the discussion about the end of World War I and its place kind of in the larger scheme of things with regard to World War II and moving forward from there.